Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our session, Innovating with Attack Flow Fireside Chat. I'm incredibly excited to be here today with you for what I think is going to be a highly enlightening session. My name is Carl Wright. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at Attack IQ, and I'm joined by an illustrious group of individuals from community. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'd like to start first with you, John.
Hey, Carl. Thanks for having me. I'm John Baker. I'm the director and co-founder of the Center for Threat Informed Defense.
Jason?
Thanks, Carl. My name is Jason Kierstead. I'm the CTO of Threat Management for IBM Security. Very excited to be here today.
And Mark.
Hey, Carl. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Mark Alba. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Anomaly.
Well, team, thank you so much for joining us. You know, uh, if you think about cyber defensive operations on a daily basis, there is so much organizations are responsible for on any given day. And I'm really excited about this session because we're going to be talking about something that I think can absolutely help people focus on the things that are important to protecting their organizations against adversaries that we're dealing with on a daily basis. So, John, I'm going to pass the puck over to you to get us set up with this discussion. Let's talk about the genesis of why we're here today.
Yeah, well, thanks, Carl. A few years back, MITRE first published the attack framework, and MITRE attack was really driven out of an internal research program that we had, where we were trying to figure out how to detect adversaries post-compromise, so in our environment. And the research team kind of had this, in hindsight, obvious realization, but at the time, it was actually one of the big real sort of revelations of that project, which was, well, wait a second, rather than just trying to build a bigger wall and prevent the adversary from getting in, let's sit down and do the intel analysis to understand, post-compromise, what do adversaries actually do when they're in our environment. And rather than focus on individual file hashes or kind of lower level indicators of compromise, let's understand the behaviors and let's start to figure out how do we detect and mitigate those specific behaviors if we really want to get good at doing detection post compromise. Well, through the course of that research, one of the key takeaways was that the intel analysis work that we had done to come up with that set of behaviors was actually really valuable. We'd started to share it with other teams and kind of got some really positive signal there, and arrived at, what the core thing that we ought to do out of that project is to publish this list. And, that's really how we got started with attack. It was driven by researchers trying to improve their ability to detect adversaries post-compromise, realizing that we needed to focus on understanding adversary behaviors first. So, fast forward a little bit, and now we've had this, growing community running with, helping to build upon and expand the attack knowledge base. And we needed a way to really systematically engage with those very sophisticated practitioners and sophisticated security teams to not just build out attack, but step back and think about what we were really doing. We were building out threat-informed defense before we knew what it was called, right? And what we were doing was systematically working to improve our ability to understand adversary behaviors and then defend against those behaviors, right? And so we had organizations coming to us, looking to collaborate with us, looking to try to accelerate work around operationalizing MITRE attack, but we didn't have a good way to do that, not systematically at least. So that's what led to me and my co-founder creating the Center for Threat Informed Defense. We created a new R&D program that brings that set of sophisticated teams together as a nonprofit to solve problems in the public interest. So everything we do, we're working to create impactful resources that enable innovation, that advance and improve cyber defense at scale globally.
Well, that's amazing, John. And from a Tech IQ perspective, we are incredibly proud to be a founding member of the Center for Threat Informed Defense. And there's a lot of amazing companies and organizations that are involved, and we have two of them here today. So, I'm going to put them both on the spot and ask them, what it is for you organizationally that you're getting out of participating in the Center for Threat Informed Defense, and how has it been for you so far? So, Jason, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, that's a big question. So at IBM Security, we've been highly involved in various different open security efforts for a number of years. Participate a lot in the OASIS standards efforts around attack itself, work that we've got going on in other organizations like the Open Cybersecurity Alliance, et cetera. So for us, the MITRE Center for Threat Informed Defense was really a natural fit and evolution of us just supporting open security research in general. It's one of the things we feel really strongly about. In terms of what value do we get out of the center? Oh boy, it's so IBM Security, we have a lot of different facets at play. We have a number of large market-leading cybersecurity products, and that's the side of the organization I mostly participate in. We also have a big services arm. We're one of the largest MSSPs in the world, and then we also have a huge incident response arm and threat intelligence as well, IBM X-Force. And all of these different organizations were actually very interested in participating in the center because the work that the center does, it has implications across the entire cybersecurity landscape. On the product side, we're looking at how do we take the great work that's being done and use it to help the defenders defend the enterprise. And then over on the X-Force side, they're trying to use it, to be able to prioritize and categorize their threat intelligence and organize their operations that they do for clients. So it's really for us very broad and far reaching. And, thus far, we've only been involved in a few projects thus far, but everyone has been, very rewarding.
Well, that's amazing. Well, thank you for that. We're going to, obviously, we all worked on this one together. We're going to double click on this a little bit. But Mark, how about you and your team?
Yeah, similar to Jason, Anomaly, obviously a lot smaller company, is really focused on the community. So our roots are in intelligence, supporting cyber threat intelligence analysts, and have evolved the platform to support security operations at large. One of the things that we found in working with MITRE Ingenuity, and specifically when John reached out, it was almost as if he was reading my emails, because when he did reach out, it was at a time where we were working with CISOs on determining how do you actually operationalize threat intelligence. And we've just seen that sort of progression, or that trend progress even further as budgets get tighter. And the discussion goes like this: I'm a CISO, I have a threat intelligence team, I receive information on threat actors on a regular basis. It's very interesting. They're PDF reports that I can read through. On the other side of it, I'm getting machine readable threat intelligence that tells me, gives me the evidence of an attack, but there's no real in between. How do I take that machine readable threat intelligence? How do I take that strategic intelligence and operationalize it? So when John reached out and we sat down and really understood, how do you take the MITRE attack framework and then literally operationalize it? Take those IOCs, identify those patterns, those tactics and techniques, and deliver on a very operational and visual representation of the attack and the pattern of the attack. That became, as we built it into our products and services, the number one thing that not just the CTI analysts were looking for, but the SOC analyst, as well as more of an executive audience. So we've received a ton from working with the group. I personally enjoy seeing the work from my threat research team as they contribute, seeing the output of this joint industry group, sometimes working with competitors, sometimes working with customers. This is the way security advances, by this type of collaboration.
No, I think you're right. And we're gonna have an amazing time here for the remainder of this session, talking about a number of those different things: operationalization of MITRE attack, community, how we come together, whether we're financially motivated or not, in order to help cyber defensive operators globally, create some leverage in their models. And that's really what this is about. I mean, as we've always said for a long time, the adversary has been sharing information way better than we have on the defensive side. And for me personally, I'm so proud for all of us to be part of the Center for Threat Informed Defense, coming together, collaborating to make state of the art, state of the practice, and the optimization of the MITRE ATT&CK, helping those defenders take it to the next level. But we're here to talk about attack flow today, which I love this project. There's a lot of super important projects at MITRE ATT&CK. I'm sorry, from the MITRE ATT&CK basic, enterprise framework that has evolved. But we're really talking about taking that original atomic concept of the framework to someplace else. So, John, I would love to hear the genesis story of this aspect of it. But maybe before we do that, and just finalizing our commitment to community, can you talk about how we're doing this? And obviously, this group of people, IBM, Anomaly, CTID, and Attack IQ, as just a few members of CTID coming together to talk about this today. We're doing a lot more than that.
Yeah, and Carl, I think this is a good way to sort of segue into the attack flow discussion anyways. When we launched the center, we launched because we had organizations coming together saying, hey, can we work on this problem with you? Are there others that we can collaborate with to solve this problem? We think this is a problem that should be solved in a way that the whole community benefits, right? And so we very much designed ourselves to enable that exact kind of collaboration. And so on a day-to-day basis, we go through and we systematically identify new problems, new challenges, and we work to figure out, is this one that we think makes sense for the center to solve? And through our research program, we work with all of you all and the rest of our membership to solve those problems. And when we're done, we publish that work and make it freely available. The Attack Flow project is a project that kind of started and went through this full life cycle. And now we're in a place where, we're working to really accelerate the impact of the Attack Flow project by helping people understand how to apply it to solve problems and advance their understanding of threats and how to defend against not just an atomic attack technique, but a whole sequence of steps that occur in an attack.
So let's jump into it then.
Yeah. Yep. So attack flow itself, as a lot of things start within our research program, it started with one of our center participants saying, hey, we're trying to communicate our threat posture up to our executive leadership. And we love MITRE ATT&CK, but you know what? Showing them an attack navigator layer or an attack matrix with cells color-coded, it just isn't very effective at communicating up to leadership. And not only is it kind of overwhelming and too busy, but really focusing on individual techniques is necessary and important, but it's not the whole story, right? And so, that was really the origin of this. It was this conversation with one of our members that led down this path of, well, what can we do to solve that problem? And so in the end, what we ended up developing was a data model that allows us to stitch together the sequences of steps or specific behaviors that an adversary takes in an attack. We can now represent those as a flow. We can share those across organizational boundaries within teams, within an organization. We can start to do analysis on top of those flows as well to start to understand how do our defenses stack up against those flows. And so, going back full circle, Carl, to, how we got started here, this then gives us the ability to, when the latest attack hits the news, your executive leadership's in the car on the way home and hears about it on the news, and they come in and they ask, like, hey, I heard about this new thing. How are we in panic mode here? How do we look? We can now take a look at not just the individual TTPs, but the whole sequence of steps. And we can look at our ability to defend against that whole chain of events. And it might be that we have a mitigation in place early on in that attack life cycle that means that, we're okay. Maybe we want to do some follow-on work to improve defenses around some of these places where there's gaps downstream if the adversary innovates. but it's not crisis today. Here's how we look. And so it's really represents a shift to starting to think about, yeah, individual behaviors are critical, but let's look at that whole sequence of steps and allowing us to share and analyze those sequences.
Well, so I'm going to go completely off script now, guys. So in the military, Department of Defense, you have squadrons of airplanes, and they have this thing every single day that somebody important gets called their readiness report. And it's the ability, like if there's 20 airplanes in a squadron, I've got 16, I got four down for maintenance, I got 16, they're ready to fly missions. It's their readiness report. They know whether or not that capability is ready, to deliver the business outcomes for which they bought them. It seems to me like, and I'd love to hear from Mark and Jason on this, like, obviously if we take this and we put it to practical application, which we'll talk more about later, an organization will understand what their cyber resilience is or their readiness is. Like, what do you think about that in relation to the analogy I gave and this project?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. So I think you're absolutely right. I think it's readiness. The predictive nature of it, though, and we're seeing a lot more of this coming from our customers. The predictive nature of it allows security organizations not to only to look at readiness, not only to be able to take evidence of an attack and to be able to predict the subsequent stages of an attack, and then look at their security posture against their security controls, but they're also using it to really assess the investment that they're making in their security controls. We have a few very innovative customers who have actually taken what we've done with Attack Flow together with our platform, and they apply an attack simulation scan, the assessment of the security posture against the potential impact of the attack. So oftentimes things like failed firewall attempts don't get logged, right? Because the firewall did what it was supposed to do. But what we've seen is that using attack flow, you can take that, whether it's reconnaissance or whatever stage it is, take that evidence of an attack, predict out the subsequent stages of the attack, and determine how much did I save by buying that firewall and actually having that firewall in place. So very interesting kind of future predictive stuff that's coming into play.
That makes total sense. I mean, so it's not just about identifying protection failures. My definition is you bought something and it's not working, it's a protection failure. You had a firewall, right? It didn't work. And by the way, that's a CIO term, not a CISO term. Think about ITIL, configuration management. When your router goes up, it's got, your network has 5 nines, but your security apparatus doesn't. It's an interesting discussion. But Jason, what's your perspective on this, and the ability to shift left? Like, if you think about a flow, it's about the ability to shift left. Where would you take this?
Yeah, I mean, so part of the value that I see in attack flow over time is the ability to leverage attack flow in order to create more complete detections that move up the pyramid of pain, right? Mm-hmm. And we actually have some other work going on in the center that's in that direction. Not to necessarily get into it in this phone call, but there's some other exciting work coming out of the center that maybe next year we can talk about those projects. But this ability to have the complete end-to-end flow of the TTPs of an attack, it lets you create higher fidelity detections, as opposed to detections that are just looking for one atomic piece of attack. You can look for the chain of events. And if you're actually looking for the chain of events, it allows you to do more accurate attribution, allows you to do more higher fidelity detection. And, to your guys' point about, looking at your defensive posture, it allows you to more accurately define what that posture is, because just because you're detecting a piece of attack doesn't mean you can actually detect the complete end-to-end cycle. So that's part of what I really like about attack flow and some of the future things that are building upon it is this, now that we have this agreed upon way to express chains of MITRE attack techniques, it kind of opens the door for a lot more powerful analytics down the road.
No, absolutely. So, John, I'm not going to leave you alone, but I'm going to take
Yeah.
you on a totally different adventure. So, one of the things I really love that MITRE and CTID have done is the evaluations, of the various different, very important controls out there. And, when I think about that, and I think about all these different disparate products that have detection logic and they have
Mhm.
prevention logic, right? And one of the things I always feel horrible about is in the Marine Corps, every Marine's a rifleman, whether they're a supply person or a cook or whatever. They can break that rifle down. They know exactly how it works. I actually don't think most cyber defensive operators understand the detection logic of the tools that they employ, right? Which means they're not going to, they're not fighting the war with the weapon that they got, right? So, John, here's my question for you. More and more tools are taking advantage of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And more vendors are saying, hey, I'm not going to fire on an atomic test. Our stuff is so smart, we look for a chain of things to happen to give, full attribution of that detection or alert. How do you see attack flow impacting in a positive or a negative way, kind of, the AI and ML aspects of cyber defensive operations?
Yeah. So Carl, it's a great question, and I'm actually going to go back to something Jason said and kind of tie a couple things together. Um, one of the things that I really love about attack flow is like now that we have this model, Jason mentioned a higher fidelity conversation. One of the places where we're starting to see a higher fidelity conversation happen among cyber defense teams is between incident responders and intel teams. And I think this is really important. Obviously, in an incident response scenario, you're very focused on usually recovery and kind of understanding that incident. But if along the way we're able to document and capture in our incident response work the flow, the steps, the set of behaviors that we're seeing as we're working that case, we can communicate much more richly back to the intel teams, which kind of creates this cycle, which drives our ability to, produce better, higher fidelity, as to Mark's point earlier, intel that's better and easier to operationalize, right? And to Jason's comment, having that come out of your incident response team and then be developed and refined with your intel team gives your detection engineers a much better hook to focus on to create those more resilient detection capabilities. And so one of the things I really love about attack flow is it creates that higher fidelity conversation, layering on top of MITRE ATT&CK, where people have been focused on techniques, but giving us a way to stitch them together across those different teams in a security organization. And so then, Carl, to your question, not going to ignore it.
I wasn't going to let you, by the way.
What's that?
I wasn't going to let you.
Yeah. What I think happens, though, as we have that conversation playing out across teams, we get to a place in an environment where, you have many organizations developing and sharing and working to detect sequences of behaviors rather than atomic behaviors. And as that starts to scale out, you create an environment where you can use that knowledge to start to be much, much better at predicting the next steps that an adversary will take. And I think it also gives you the ability, if you're a threat hunting team, to be able to look back too. As I'm hunting for a particular, threat within my environment, I found this, and based on the set of flows that we've analyzed, I probably ought to look for these precursors. What happened before this? And it gives you a much better way to start to dig into that and guidance. And I think that's all possible through that like community-wide adoption of attack flow and really kind of getting to, as Jason said, that higher fidelity conversation among security teams.
Well, so thank you, John. Jason and Mark, I'm going to come back right back over to you guys because ML and AI is such an important part of a lot of product strategies that are out there and vendors that are providing amazing capabilities. Do you have a perspective on that as it pertains to attack flow?
I think I do. I think, as I was mentioning, it's definitely going to help because you can, in theory, you can actually build your models based on the chains of events, right? As opposed to just looking at the TTPs in isolation. So when
Yeah.
you're trying to find, and it's actually applicable not just for detecting known threat actors, but it's also applicable for detecting new, never before seen chains of attack techniques as well, which might signal new threat actors that are unknown in the wild. So I think that there's a number of interesting things that could materialize over time. As the key is once attack flow is there and the data starts getting tagged with it, right? This has been one of the great kind of enablers that MITRE ATT&CK has in general, right? Once detection products started tagging the things they detected with attack, it kind of opened the doors to a lot of new possibilities for a lot of defenders. And I think the same thing could happen with attack flow. Once products start
Right.
detecting the actual flows and tagging the flows, it opens the window to a whole new world of analytical capabilities. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think, what we're seeing is, and Jason, you kind of hit the nail on the head, is, attribution is always important. We want to be able to assign an attack to an attacker. But the reality is we can move away from that and really look at defined patterns, understood patterns. It may not have an associated actor with it. I do see I'm an old AV guy, so I'll always go back to signatures as being one of the more effective ways. If you can find a known threat using it, a low compute type technology like signatures, let's go for it. But I think what I'm starting to see is as we have the data, we have the global intelligence on indicators. I think the key thing there, I think Jason, you're going down this path, is how do you make sure that you have that the correct association between indicator and then moving up the pyramid of pain, the tactics, the techniques, that more strategic intelligence? That's what attack flow is giving us, is the ability to make that progression up and then to have more of that strategic discussion around the actual attack or an attack pattern.
Totally makes sense. Well, so John, I don't know if I want to lob this grenade in, but maybe I will. Um, does this help solve MITRE ATT&CK bingo in some aspect?
um, I think there's always going to be a little bit of the attack bingo game, and the attack bingo game is really that atomic technique focus, and people putting together their attack navigator layer, color coding techniques by their sense of coverage or coverage gaps, right? I think it gets us to a little bit more sophisticated conversation around coverage. And it allows us to kind of step up a level and think about that sequence of steps and how do we defend against how adversaries are actually operating. Because no adversary goes and executes one technique. You're always executing a series of techniques. So I don't know if bingo is going away. I think that there's always going to be a need to kind of dig into a technique and think about how you defend against or mitigate that particular technique. That's probably a good thing to do. But I think it's also important to have that richer conversation about how do we defend against this overall attack, right? So we should be doing both.
Makes total sense. By the way, I just wanted to say attack bingo. Sorry about
Yeah.
that. So what do we got on this slide, John?
So you've heard us talking about attack flow. True to the center's mission, it's out and available. You'll find up on our website a set of examples, a rich set of documentation, a flow builder, so a web application, with all of the sort of bells and whistles you would expect out of an editor capability that allows you to create your own flows. You can open up the examples and explore those. And we've put together a set of visualization capabilities as well. That's all up and of course freely available. It's all up in GitHub for you to grab. And there's a nice sort of website there to kind of guide you through learning how to use attack flow and understanding what it is. Definitely would encourage you to go check it out. And then, honestly, we think we love attack flow. We've done a lot of work with the overall, set of center participants to develop attack flow, gotten a lot of community feedback, but we recognize that there's always room for improvement. And as you're getting started with attack flow, if you have questions, we want to hear about it. That's those sorts of questions. They drive and improve the quality of the research products we have. And then, along those same lines, if you're interested in contributing flows to like our example corpus or building upon the work, we'd love to hear about it and we'd love to work with you all.
So for John and the team, first of all, this wasn't one project; it was two, right? So we did Attack Flow 1 and Attack Flow 2, which represents what, about probably 9 months in aggregate of work. What was the highlight for you of this project? And then conversely, is there something left you think we need to do? Love to and I know later we'll talk a little bit more about some futures, but I'd like to get your individual thoughts about that, Jason and Mark.
Yeah, I'll say the highlight for me, and I remember the day, was when my threat research team wrote their first pattern based off of the framework, and actually seeing it, in application. That to me was exciting because I knew, number one, that they were doing something that allowed us to kind of extend it in the ways that we've been talking about, the view into an attack. But I also knew that would be provided back out to the community. So that the sense of being able to deliver on immediate product and deliver on the community definitely was something that I remember.
That's great. And what would you like to do with it next?
Oh boy. I talk about the predictive nature of it. I think John was we were just talking about, MITRE bingo. And I think one of the things that we're seeing a lot of is not just looking at extending a particular detection to the attack flow, but what we're seeing more of is that predictive nature of it. And actually our first implementation of attack flow within our platform was less about detection and more about planning. So we actually had within our threat intelligence offering the ability to apply an attack flow against the framework, look at the attacker trends that are relevant to my industry, and then move down into what that impact looks like. I think taking that, Carl, working with companies like Attack IQ to actually operationalize it, I think we're reaching a point, and I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but I think we're reaching a point with attack flow supporting it where we're moving to more continuous monitoring of attackers, not continuous monitoring of your SOC, although that's hugely important, but it's continuous monitoring of attackers, ensuring that you understand the patterns of attack, predict the future stage of an attack, update security controls. I'd like to see that all automated.
Well, that Mark, that sounds like the heart of a threat-informed defense. I love it.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And Jason, I know you got to be thinking about this too.
Yeah, I mean, so what I'm excited about next, and I mean, I talked about it a little bit, and to me, it's all I'm very passionate with this idea of chaining together attack techniques and being able to share and collaborate around what we call indicators of behavior, right? So to plug another group that I'm involved with, the Open Cybersecurity Alliance, we have this working group around indicators of behavior, and we actually have some folks from the center participating in that group now. And one of the things I'm really excited about is we've been working on how do we extend the STIC standard to support the complete end-to-end sharing of indicators of behavior, including not just the chain, but also all the detections that are tied to that chain. So I'm looking for this chain. Here's how I detected those things, and then have that all in a package of STIX extensions that defenders can now collaborate around, right? So that's not just a proprietary analytic with a proprietary vendor looking for this complex thing, but we can now talk about it in the open. And to me, that's what I'm most excited about this work, is starting get into that space around collaborating around attack flows, building up a corpus in the community of attack flows, and then being able to leverage that and share and collaborate around it. You talked about it at the start of the call, Carl, and I say the same thing all the time. Like our adversaries are all collaborating way better than we are, and we've made a lot of progress sharing threat intelligence over the past like 4 or 5 years. We've now got to make the same progress in terms of detection engineering and collaboration around detections, right? So we have the intelligence on one side. Now we've got to enable the detections, and to your point, like we have to make everyone a rifleman, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll just share with you guys, I concur with everything everyone said so far. Shocking. We all do this together every week. But, um, for me, when enough attack flows are generated from a machine perspective and shared globally with cyber defensive operators, can you imagine back to the predictive thing? I know, John, I'm not going to steal your thunder with that later, but think about choke point analysis. Think about shifting left. Think about like really getting focused with, if we understand all of our flows and we understand all of our defensive capabilities and we understand all of our process capabilities, like, where we can focus our effort on a daily basis. So I agree with the predictive aspect of this and some of the things we can do. We've been talking around it a little bit, but one of the things I want to do in the session, and one of the reasons Mark and Jason are here, is actually talk practical application of attack flows. Like, how do you take this amazing research that the center produces, and this is just one of so many interesting projects that you guys can check out and take advantage of. But how do you take the research and the things that are produced by the Center for Threat Informed Defense and then leverage it yourself, whether you are a commercial organization, a government organization, a product vendor, a system integrator? It doesn't really matter. The purpose of what we do is to generate very useful things that increase the state of the art, state of the practice of the MITRE ATT&CK framework and threat informed defense, and to help you operationalize that. So we're going to take some time and walk you through just as examples of how we've leveraged this research, and hopefully this innovation around this spurs you to have great ideas of how you can use it as well. So I think first up we've got IBM. So Jason, why don't you talk about how you've leveraged this research?
Yeah, thanks. And, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have a lot of different parts of IBM security, and we're planning on leveraging attack flow in a bunch of them, including the services arm and X-Force, et cetera. I'm going to focus today, though, on the product side. So one of the ways that we plan on leveraging this first in the products is we have this capability in our product suite called Threat Investigator. And really briefly, what Threat Investigator does is it takes in a security incident that's been detected, and it essentially automates kind of your level 1 analysis. So it'll take all of the findings that are inside the case or the alert, and it'll go and investigate those for you. It'll go and automatically query and do a bunch of research and tie up to our Watson corpus in the cloud and try to map the incident into a threat actor campaign. So while it's doing all this, one of the things that it does is it builds up a chain of attack techniques over time, right? And you can see this in the second picture below, a little bit fuzzy perhaps on the webinar here, but you can see that chain, that chain of activities. Every one of those boxes has a MITRE ATT&CK technique. So when you see this, what is this thing? It's obviously an attack flow. And when we saw the attack flow project, we saw the immediate synergy with our threat investigator capability. So one of the first things we're going to be doing is adding the ability to have the results of threat investigator be output into attack flows. So then one of our customers can then pick up that attack flow and use that with any other product. They can use that with a breach and attack simulation. They might use that to go and work on a threat report. This whole idea of using that open standard and collaborative capability around attack flow. So that's, a lot of products have, to your point, Carl, about, trying to brainstorm things with folks in the call here. I know that we're not the only one that has a capability like this. So if you do have a capability like this in your product, this is somewhere where you'd probably want to think about adding it support for this standard. So
Well, that makes total sense, and I love what you guys have done with this. And again, it gets back to what we were talking about before, the ability to share, right? And the fact that you're using this project as an open standard, right, puts you in a better position to integrate and collaborate with other products and services and things of that nature. So that's awesome. Um, so Mark, we've got you up next.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about how we've applied it across our platform. So, one thing about our platform, we were built out primarily as a threat intelligence platform going back 10 years. And we built, indicator of compromise based detection, what I call high fidelity, high signal based detection, which has a lot of flaws in the sense that if you don't have enough indicators of compromise, you're not actually detecting threats within your environment. And so as we built out our platform, we've built very high performance correlation across billions of indicators. Now, the issue is that, as we've been discussing, is that you get to an indicator, you get to a point of attack. It's retroactive. You're having to build the associations. You're having to build out the additional analysis that gets you to not just even a detection, but to a true response. And so, as we look at the application of the attack flow framework, what we've done is we built into it those associations. So, how do you ladder up from an indicator of compromise to the tactics, to the techniques, eventually to the campaigns that give you a more comprehensive response? And so, from a threat detection standpoint, we still deliver on indicator-based compromise, but again, based attack detection, as well as indicator of attack based detection. But we're able to ladder it up, as I had mentioned, to doing things like supporting exposure management. So if I understand the attack surface of an organization and which assets are being attacked, I can again take those attacked assets, understand that point of attack, and then understand the totality of the attack using the attack pattern. Other things that we look at are compromised assets. So if we know that a certain threat actor has compromised your credentials or compromised a domain, that's evidence of an attack. So how do I take that and build out that subsequent attack pattern? And then the final thing, and I've been talking a lot about this, which is hugely important, is applied intelligence. How do I take intelligence, which oftentimes within organizations is static, and apply it across, again, the application of breach attack simulation, across security posture control. Again, all these are enabled through our application of attack flow. And so as you look at, this is a more kind of practical application of it. Again, we are focused across, cyber threat and foreign defense. The cyber fusion term has been used out there as well. I simply put it as people need to talk more to each other and collaborate. One of the first things that we do when we think about attack flow is that we really focus on establishing visibility. So how do I provide an organization with an understanding of the attackers, their prioritized intelligence requirements? Who should I be concerned about on a daily basis? We provide them with situational awareness on those attacks. So who do I care about today versus yesterday? And how is that changing based off of attack patterns? And then this is what's really important, is how do I take that and then understand, as I was describing earlier, the predictive nature of the attack using an attack flow pattern. What are the subsequent stages of an attack that I am potentially vulnerable to, and then using that, really moving to building the detections, as Jason was talking about. So I understand the subsequent stages of the attack. I can update my security controls, but I should also update my detection capability to make sure that I have precision detection across all subsequent stages of the attack. And then I'll go back to, kind of that closed loop, which is once you have those detections, I think, John, you were just talking about this, it's that feedback loop from the incident response team back into cyber threat intelligence team. This is what we've seen. This is actually the pattern. This is the change in pattern. This is how we feed it back in. That's what we're looking to enable. Attack flow really becomes the basis for all of that. I think one of the most important things that we're seeing, which I'm very excited about, you asked about milestones. The first one was when my team delivered on their first pattern. The second one was actually having, some of our customers wanting to share patterns as part of, our sharing platform, and doing so in kind of a rapid response model. As Log4j, as new vulnerabilities come out, how do I make sure that I have the right understanding of the attack patterns that will potentially exploit those vulnerabilities?
Look, Mark, I think you guys are definitely onto something. I mean, the whole concept of fusion is, sharing information and creating a decision support framework, right? And so
Yeah.
it sounds like you guys are well on your way. From an Attack IQ perspective, we're very similar, I think, to the other sponsors here. We have something called an adversary research team, and we partner with CISA and work with them directly, just like the MITRE attack team does. And so when a CISA alert comes out, that triggers kind of basically we call them graphs, but they're basically attack flows, an entire process where we generate and publish a attack flow that corresponds to that CISA alert, right? And then we overlay it with, from both a prevention and detection perspective, content that allows an organization to exercise their security apparatus from both a prevention and detection perspective to assess, whether or not, from a readiness or resilience perspective, more readiness that they can detect or block that particular adversary. And not surprisingly, a lot of us, our flows are looking similar graphically, how it looks for, but we enumerate the entire kill chain. We have Boolean logic to make decisions because an adversary doesn't just stop with one TTP. If that doesn't work, they may go do a bunch of other things as well. And we enumerate the kill chain. Part of the openness of how we think about this and the attack flow project is that whether we're importing a JSON file of machine readable flows, or we're exporting this in a JSON file that it can be used someplace else, whether that's Navigator or something else, we both import and export these flows within the standard JSON kind of MITRE attack, what we've been used since the very beginning. And so this is, for us, just sharing kind of a commercial for the Center for Threat Informed Defense. This brings significant engineering force multiplication to our team because we work on these projects with, Mark and Jason and all the rest of the great sponsors that are out there. And when we finish a project like this, we can bring it right in and productize it inside of our product, getting things to market, more value to our customers a lot faster, taking advantage of these open standards and the things that we work on together like this. And attack flow is obviously one of my most favorite projects we've done, right up there with NIST 853 and Attack Calculator and some of the other ones. But this is how we've leveraged it. And if you want to check out that URL, attack.com/research, every CIS alert that comes out, we produce a corresponding graph. And one thing I do want to say, I've said it often, is that MITRE attack has a glass ceiling. It rarely translates well into the executive board level. But when you can articulate a campaign by an adversary that's targeting your corporation and show it in more of this graph or flow format, management tends to get this a lot better than talking about the ones and zeros of a specific TTP. And so I think one of the great benefits of Attack Flow's project has been our ability to graphically uplevel the conversation for those folks that are not CDO, cyber defensive operators, on a daily basis. And a picture, is worth 1,000 words in so many cases. So that's how we use it. So John, you know, talked to Mark and Jason about the future of what they like to see, and shockingly, they're also articulating a little bit of what you're thinking about. But you want to bring us home with this
Yeah.
slide?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think this slide in a way just sort of brings together a lot of what you just heard from Mark and Jason here. And when I look at what we've done in the center's research program to date, is Carl mentioned we've done a lot of great work, a pretty wide range of projects. We've actually created a foundation, though, that I think that we will continue to build upon, that can get us to kind of like that nirvana of predictive intelligence. And I think with the center's research program, we've created this program or project called the Sightings Ecosystem. I describe that to people as, think about your MITRE ATT&CK knowledge base. That's your encyclopedia. It tells you about all of the different types of behaviors that have been seen out in the wild. Sightings Ecosystem takes the next step, and it's, here's what's actually happening now, is what that's really all about. And it's about trying to help people understand and create an environment for data-driven decisions for defenders. So you can see, what are adversaries doing today? And it basically is us collecting and analyzing events correlated to attack techniques, and doing that in a way that's global, that's cross-sector, so we can get that really holistic picture. What I'd like to see is, very much as Jason and Mark and Carl all talked about here, us kind of doubling down as a community, and starting to have that, as Jason said, that higher fidelity conversation, where we're looking at flows, sequences of adversary behaviors, where we're collecting them, and to Jason's point, where we're sharing them. If we build out a rich corpus of flows that represent not what we think adversaries might do, but what they've actually done, that creates a tremendous opportunity for us to leverage AI and start to figure out, all right, well, based on this rich corpus of what adversaries have actually done, what do we think they're going to do next? And it's going to get us to a place where not only can we think about what's next, but what likely preceded this, as I said earlier. You can start to think about scenarios where, in some cases, attribution matters. You can start to use that corpus to understand and get better at doing attribution, right? But the only way we get there is, working together as a community to understand and capture and represent those flows, and to share them in a way that allows for that analysis. And so to me, this is like the big challenge I want us to tackle next through the center's research program. And, I don't think it's something we're going to tackle overnight, but I think, with our center participants support, with community support, we can work there, and we can make things significantly more efficient for defenders, and really work towards changing the game on the adversary. And that's ultimately our mission in the center.
Well, that sounds awesome, John. And since you brought up AI, I want you guys to know I went to Chat GPT and asked them to create a attack flow, and it didn't do a very good job. So it's got a ways to go.
So we're safe for now.
Shocking, right? Everything else it does amazing. So John, that's a good setup for kind of the last slide, for our participants and the people in the audience listening. How can they get involved, and how do they get more information?
Yeah. Thanks, Carl. And so we touched on a little bit of this earlier. Obviously, if you want to just jump right into attack flow, that's up on the website. The easiest way to get involved is go there, take a look at it, use it, tell us what you think, help us make it better, right? And then, I kind of ratchet up from there. I think the next step beyond there is, looking across the research program, helping us to figure out where else we should be going. If you're an organization that you're looking around the virtual room here and saying, hey, we're tackling similar problems, we've got ideas, we want a seat at the table, join us as a center participant. Our center participants really come together and drive the R&D program, with their ideas, their problems, their innovations, and their funding. And so as a nonprofit, we've worked together to create an environment where we have, very sophisticated practitioners collaborating to advance threat-informed defense ultimately in the public interest and trying to do that globally. And so right now, I'm trying to thoughtfully build out our membership base to increase that cross-sector and global representation. So if you are kind of looking at this work and you're interested and you're kind of feeling like that's a venue I want to be in, reach out to us. We'd love to talk with you about, honestly, accelerating the development of threat-informed defense across the community.
No, it's amazing. And honestly, you get to hang out with a bunch of cool kids like Jason and Mark as well. So, look, I'd like to thank Jason and John and Mark so much for taking time and participating in this with us today. I hope the audience found this useful. And, I strongly encourage you to check out the CTID and all the research that this team has put together and done, as well as check out some of the things that Jason and Mark have also talked about specific to how they're leveraging this great research in the products and services that they're bringing to market. So team, thank you so much for your time today.